Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa Ahl Baytihi at-Tayyibin at-Tahirin. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. That was unfortunately a 10:12 p.m. salawat. Let us recite another louder, more energetic salawat, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wajjal farajahum. And for the love of Imam Hussein, a third and even louder salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wajjal farajahum. We seem to live in a world that doesn't really recognize the value of humility. If we look at the times that we are living in, contrary to past times, for example, we find that if someone has the quality of humility, it is seen almost as if they have a weakness. And when someone has the opposite quality, they are arrogant. They are very in your face. People tend to look at that quality and see it as the characteristic of an achiever. If we look at the upper echelons of the financial world, where people make a lot of money, you'll see that many times they are extremely arrogant. And it's almost expected of them to be arrogant. That the more arrogant that you can become, the more money you can accumulate, the more things you can control. But when we look at the values of the Anbiya, who had the highest of ranks in the eyes of Allah, and really that's the true value in this universe, we find that they were the most humble of beings. Now, us being raised in the West, growing up in the West in many cases, it becomes difficult for us to really understand what humility is. And I personally, when I really left the US, I went to the Middle East, I began to travel through the different countries, I began to see more of that Islamic culture. Of course, there's many negative aspects as well, but there's many positives as well. I began to realize that there was a very big difference between the way that people behaved in terms of humility over there versus over here. Tonight, I wanted to really open up this discussion of what it means to be humble. And I'm going to begin with two stories from my time in the Hawza. Story number one, I'll never forget this. When I had gone to Iran, we begin to hear about this thing that was called the Arba'in walk. You know, the Arba'in walk during the time of Saddam Hussein, it was suppressed. People were not allowed to do this walk because Saddam was afraid of the revolutionary potential of people going and gathering in masses and mourning for Imam Hussein. But after the downfall of Saddam, the movement began to gain steam again. And people, they slowly began to do this thing which they called the Arba'in walk. And so I remember, if it was my second year, my third year there, I began to hear these whispers that there is this thing called the Arba'in walk, where you go to Iraq and you walk from the city of Najaf all the way to Karbala, and you're there on the day of Arba'in. And so we decided to go. We made a few phone calls. We found some connections in Iraq. And we found a scholar who, he said, if you come, I will host you. And this is one of the things, when you go on the Arba'in walk, you're going to really see the generosity of a people that really don't have that much. But whatever they have, they're willing to put it at the feet of the Zuwar for the love of Imam Hussein. Really, that's another discussion for another day, that if you want to see true generosity, go to Iraq during the time of Arba'in. In any case, we went to Iraq and we were hosted by a very well-known scholar. He was very well known in the city of Kufa and the city of Najaf in Iraq. And he was hosting us with just a great deal of love. Whatever we needed, he would bring and he would put at our disposal. As we would go throughout the city with him, one of the things that we began to notice is that wherever we went, people wanted to take pictures with him. And so they would quickly come up and they would say, "Can we have a picture with you?" And he would never say no. He would always agree. But he would do something that struck us as being extremely strange. What would he do? As soon as they were getting ready to take that picture, he would always look down. Every single time. Whenever they were about to take that picture, he would always put his face down. He would put his eyes down. And of course, this was so strange for us, because we come from a society that when someone wants to take your picture, you look into the camera, you look confident, you smile. Some of the brothers may even suddenly have spasms in their arms, their muscles get bigger. This is how it is. And so I was wondering that why is it that he keeps doing this over and over and over again? And then I realized that the reason that he was doing this was to maintain a state of humility. Because one of the things that the scholars were so afraid of is that as we become more and more well known, the danger is that as the people pay more attention to us, we begin to feel as if we are something special. And that is one of the most destructive things that can happen to any human being. And so they would always do this, and you can still see this with the old school ulama in Najaf, is that whenever the time comes for a picture, many of them, out of a sense of humility, they always look down. They refuse to look into that camera. This was story number one. Story number two was that when I had first entered into the Hawza, I noticed that the way that the scholars would discuss different issues was very different from what we were used to here. You know, here, when you are discussing something amongst brothers, and this may be more prevalent amongst the men, sometimes when you're discussing an issue, it becomes very heated. You sometimes act disrespectfully, you call people names, because you want to prove that point. But when I entered into the Hawza and I entered into these gatherings, what I saw was that when the ulama were discussing a issue, and there were many issues to discuss and it would sometimes get very heated, but they were always extremely careful to maintain the respect of the other scholars. It was very important. If there was ever a larger gathering, I saw this happen sometimes, that there was a class and there was an elder teacher who was teaching a subject. Sometimes a student would ask a question which, in spite of the knowledge that that teacher had, the teacher wouldn't know the answer to it. You know, it happens. They're not supermen or superwomen that every question that you ask they're going to know the answer to. Sometimes they would ask a question, the scholar didn't know the answer, and there was someone in that gathering who perhaps had come across that question and that answer. One of the things which that individual would do is they would never raise their hand and say, "By the way, the teacher doesn't know, I know." You know, sometimes we see that when we went to school, when we went to university, the teacher didn't know an answer. "Oh, I know the answer." We would try to one-up the teacher. But that student, he would never ever say a word. Why? Because he wanted to maintain that state of humility. He wanted to maintain the respect of his teacher, who has been serving Islam for so many years. And after that session had ended, he would go and he would approach that individual who had the question, and very quietly he would say, "By the way, the answer to what you were seeking, I just happened to come across it randomly. This is the answer." My brothers and sisters, within the Islamic world, particularly within the world of the Hawza, humility is seen as one of the most prized characteristics. And in fact, whenever there was a student who didn't show humility, many times the elder teachers, they would say, this individual, he's not worthy of the Hawza. We need to do something to kind of speed his process along, to get him to leave. Because they knew that if at this point, this individual does not have humility, there is going to be problems later on. There is going to be tragedies later on. Now, whenever we want to look at a topic, whatever the topic may be, one of the first places that we have to turn to is the Holy Quran. When we open the pages of the Holy Quran, there are a number of verses that deal with this issue of humility. One of those verses, when you first read it, you're going to be a little bit surprised. Because the language that it uses in describing humility is a type of language that we don't use, that we are not used to. What does the verse say? The verse in the Holy Quran, it says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَإِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ حَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. The verse is saying what? It is saying that the servants of Ar-Rahman, the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are who? He says that they are those who walk humbly on the face of the earth. What a strange way to describe humility. Why is it strange? Because if I wanted to say that an individual is humble, I would, for example, say Hassan, he's a humble man. Fatima is a humble woman. This is how we describe things. But when we look at the way that Allah is describing, He is saying that the servants of Allah, they are known by this one characteristic, that when they walk upon the face of the earth, they walk with humility. What is Allah trying to say here? Allah is trying to say, according to some understandings, that the individual that is humble, it isn't just a superficial humility. No. It is a type of humility that has permeated into his heart, into his mind, into his soul. That when he looks at someone, he looks at them with humility. When he speaks with someone, he speaks with them with humility. When he walks on the face of the earth, he is walking in a state of humility. That humility has become part and parcel of who he or she is. Because sometimes we have a superficial characteristic. That we pretend to be courageous, we pretend to be humble, but when the time really comes, it hasn't really permeated into our souls. It isn't a part of who we are. And of course, at that moment of death, we mentioned this in the first session, that when the soul is separated from the physical body, all of the superficial aspects of our existence are also separated. All of those things that we would pretend to be, all of that is going to be separated from us, and the real me is going to be revealed to myself. This was verse number 1. Verse number 2, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us the secret of a dua that really can reach Allah. Because sometimes we do dua, we ask Allah for something, but when we ask Allah for something, we're not really asking Him in a deep way, in a sincere way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us these 2 keys. He says, "Ud'u rabbakum tadarru'an وخفيا إنه لا يحب المعتدين. Allah, He says that when you want to do dua, whenever you want to ask me something, you need something badly, He says, I want you to do two things. Number one, I want you to ask me with utter humility. I don't know if you've ever seen an arrogant beggar. One of my friends in Iran, he said that one time I came across an arrogant beggar. He says, I've never seen anything like it. He wanted money from me, but he came in a very arrogant way. He said, give me some money right now. How do you think my friend reacted to him? There is nothing more distasteful than one who doesn't have anything to their name, and they are asking one who has everything with arrogance, with an entitled feeling. As believers, sometimes we feel a sense of entitlement, don't we? We say, Ya Allah, I've prayed for X amount of years, I fasted for X amount of years, I've done all of these good deeds for you. Therefore, you owe me. I want X, Y, and Z. But when we are faced with Allah, does Allah owe me anything? In fact, even the dua that I am asking Allah for, the what which I am asking Him to give me, I am asking Him with a body, a tongue, a mind, a spirit, a soul, all of the things which He has given to me. And then Allah says, the second thing after humility is that sometimes it's difficult for us to really connect with Allah when we are in public. So He says, whenever you really want to ask me, one of the things that can be done is that you ask in private. You go somewhere where no one is watching you, no one can see you, and that is where you can really open up. You can really begin to cry. You can really begin to ask Allah and say, Ya Allah, I don't have anything other than what you have given to me. With the utmost humility, this is what I need from you. Please give me these things. So within the Holy Quran, Allah is giving us these little secrets of how we can actually receive the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the question that I wanted to come back to was the question that why was it that within the Hawza and within the Holy Quran, this issue of humility is given this level of importance? Because we all know that humility is good. We all know. I don't think there's anyone that is going to say humility is a negative trait. But how badly are we in need of having a humble heart? How important is it as believers and as lovers of Imam Hussein? I'm going to mention 3 points, inshallah. Point number one, if you want to gain knowledge, one of the prerequisites, you have to have this prerequisite, there is no other way, is that you have to have humble state of being. Why? When you go to university, when you go to high school, in many cases you're going to see individuals that are going to have this attitude that I don't need the professor. I don't need the teacher. I don't need to be here. I'm good to go. As a human being, as a believer in God, as someone that is trying to gain knowledge, can you approach the gaining of knowledge with arrogance? Imagine that you go to this course, you go to the Hawza, you open up the Quran, you open up a book of Ahadith, and you look at it with arrogance that I don't need this. The people, they need me. How much knowledge will that heart be able to absorb? Zero. That is a heart that is completely closed to the possibility of gaining knowledge. And by the way, when we look at that famous hadith, which it mentions what true knowledge is, what does it say? It says that knowledge is not extensive learning. Rather, it is a nur, it is a light that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He places in the hearts of whomever He wills. That's real knowledge. That wisdom is something that cannot be gained except through a humble heart. And by the way, when we look at the school of the Ahlul Bayt, when we look at Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, when we look at the event of Saqifa, why was the main reason that the people rejected the Khilafah of Ali? What was the main reason that the people rejected the leadership of the Ahlul Bayt? It was nothing other than arrogance. They looked at the knowledge of Ali, the leadership qualities of Ali, and they said, you know what, we don't need that. We're good to go. Ali is too young. Ali has killed too many of the elite of the Quraysh. We are better capable of rulership than the Ahlul Bayt. That arrogance, my brothers and sisters, where did it take the Muslim Ummah? It took them to the plains of Karbala. This was reason number one. Reason number two is that when we are looking at the defects that we have within ourselves, we're all human beings. Each and every one of us, we have deficiencies, we have weaknesses within ourselves. It is the humble heart that has the capacity to honestly look inside and to say, I have these weaknesses, I have these deficiencies. What will the arrogant heart do? The arrogant heart is going to say, I'm good to go. I am the shining example for everyone else to see. But the one that is humble is actually able to look inside honestly, to say that before Allah, I have these deficiencies. I need to do this amount of work in healing myself and fixing myself. This was the second benefit of humility. The third benefit of humility is that in this relationship that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you really ask the question, what is Islam? Islam is nothing other than submission. And for me to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to say, Ya Allah, what is it that you want me to do? Who is it that you want me to be? It takes that humility to submit. What did we mention was the problem of shaitan? The problem of shaitan was the arrogance that he had. That when Allah said, I want you to bow down, I want you to do this, shaitan said that I'm willing to do everything else that you have commanded, but Ya Allah, you cannot order me to do this one thing. Why? Because I am better than Adam alayhi salam. It was arrogance. And so the greater our level of humility that we develop within ourselves, the better, the stronger that relationship we can have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here I wanted to introduce a story to all of you, and it is really a beautiful story about the depths of humility that we find within the ulama. This is a very well-known story. Some of you may have heard at least some parts of it. The story goes as follows, that during past times, there was a scholar by the name of Sayyid Bahrul Ulum. Sayyid Bahrul Ulum, he was a very well-known, a very pious, a very knowledgeable scholar, and he lived in the city of Najaf. On the other side of the border, in the land of Iran, there was another scholar by the name of Mullah Mahdi Naraghi. And he also was an extremely knowledgeable and well-known scholar, and he was particularly known for a book that he had written by the name of Jami' al-Sa'adat. Very beautiful book on the issue of akhlaq, meaning that these illnesses that we have within ourselves, arrogance and the bad ways of behavior that sometimes we show to others, it gave all of the secrets, the practical ways of getting rid of these issues. One day, the book of Mullah Mahdi Naraghi is brought to Sayyid Baharul Ulum in the city of Najaf. And Sayyid Baharul Ulum, he begins to look through this book, and he is praising this book as he is going through the different lessons and the different pages. And he is saying, may Allah bless Mullah Mahdi Naraghi for doing such a great service to the Muslim world. Then he gives the book back, and a little bit of time passes. After that time passes, Mullah Mahdi Naraghi, he makes a decision to go on ziyarah to Iraq. He begins to make that journey, and of course at that time it wasn't easy. It wasn't like today that we sit on this plane and suddenly we take a nap and we are in the Holy Lands. It was difficult to make these journeys. He begins the journey with some of his companions. Eventually he makes it to the city of Najaf. When he makes it to the city of Najaf, as was the custom of that time, all of the ulama, they gather, the elite ulama, the top ulama, and they come to visit Mullah Mahdi Naraghi. And they tell Sayyid Baharul Ulum, who is possibly one of the greatest scholars of the city, they tell him, by the way, Mullah Mahdi Naraghi, that individual whose book you were reading, he's actually come on ziyarah. Let's go and see him. Sayyid Baharul Ulum, instead of the normal, getting up and getting ready to go see this individual, he doesn't pay any attention. He says, okay, good, let him come. He doesn't pay the least amount of attention to the coming of Mullah Mahdi Naraghi. These other scholars, they go, they visit Mullah Mahdi Naraghi, they pay their respects. That day ends, the next day comes. Mullah Mahdi Naraghi, he says, I want to go and I want to pay my respects, to show my humility before these scholars who came to visit me. He goes and he visits these scholars, and then he says, where is the home of Sayyid Baharul Ulum? They say, Mullah Mahdi, he isn't one of those that came to see you. And in that time period, in the circle of the ulama, it was a little bit of a snub. It was a little bit of disrespect to have someone that is a great scholar come and then you don't go and visit them. Mullah Mahdi, he says, it doesn't matter that he didn't come. I want to go and I want to see him. And Mullah Mahdi, he says that he is a great scholar. He is someone that when I look at him, he reminds me of Allah. I want to go and I want to visit him. The companions say, okay, let's go see him. They begin to make their way through the streets of Najaf. Eventually, they reach the home of Sayyid Baharul Ulum. They enter into the home. There is a gathering of scholars, a class that is taking place. Mullah Mahdi, he enters and he goes and he sits down in a corner of the house after giving his salams. Somebody comes up and they tell Sayyid Baharul Ulum, Sayyid, this is that Mullah Mahdi Naraghi that we were telling you about. Do you know how Sayyid Baharul Ulum reacts? He doesn't pay the least bit of attention to Mullah Mahdi. After 45 minutes, Mullah Mahdi is sitting there, he is listening to the lesson, the discussions that are taking place. He eventually gets up, he says, Salaamu Alaikum, and then he leaves the house. He goes. The companions of Mullah Mahdi, they are fuming at this point. Because not only did he not come to visit, he disrespected the first time. Then when Mullah Mahdi went to visit, he did it again, and it was even worse because it was in person. They're fuming, they're angry, they're saying, what kind of an individual is this Sayyid Baharul Ulum? How disrespectful is he? But strangely enough, Mullah Mahdi doesn't show even the least bit of upset. He's very calm. Eventually, Mullah Mahdi, he says, I want to go do the ziyarah of the different imams in the land of Iraq. He goes, he travels around. When he comes back, a few days passes, he says that I want to go and I want to visit Sayyid Baharul Ulum again. The companions say, Mullah Mahdi, don't do it. How many times are you going to be disrespected? How much of this are you going to take? Enough! Mullah Mahdi says that I want to go see this great scholar. I want to benefit from him. Who am I? He is the one that we should be going and seeing. He begins to make his way. He finds the home of Sayyid Bahrul Ulum. He enters into the home. Again he says Salaamu Alaikum. Again he sits in the corner. And again, even worse than last time, Sayyid Bahrul Ulum shows him zero attention. He doesn't say, come and sit next to me. He doesn't say, please, can you teach us a few lessons? He doesn't say that this is Mullah Mahdi Naraghi. He has come. He is a guest of ours. Nothing. He pays him zero attention. After a while, Mullah Mahdi, again, he gets up and he leaves. The companions of his now, they are enraged. And this is where, by the way, the slander and the issues, they begin. In usual circumstances, they are saying everything that they can say. But Mullah Mahdi, he says, don't say a word. This is a great scholar, and if he has done this, he has a reason. There must be a reason. Eventually the day comes when Mullah Mahdi, he says that it is now time for me to go back to Iran. My time in Iraq has come to an end. He has done all of the ziyarah, he is finished. He begins to pack his bags, but before he leaves, he turns towards his companions and he says that I want to visit Sayyid Bahrul Ulum and benefit from his lessons one last time. You can imagine what the companions are saying. They're probably thinking that he's lost it. He begins to make his way through the dusty streets of Najaf. Someone goes and they let Sayyid Bahrul Ulum know that Mullah Mahdi Naraghi, he is coming towards you and he's going to be leaving the land of Arab. His ziyarah has finished. When Sayyid Bahrul Ulum hears it this time, he rushes out without even bothering to put on his amama. He rushes out, he is in such a rush, he is in such haste that he doesn't even bother to put on his shoes. He runs outside into the street, bareheaded, barefooted, and he is standing there at the edge of the street in a very strange state of humility. Mullah Mahdi Naraghi arrives. Sayyid Bahrul Ulum, he hugs him, he kisses him. He kisses his forehead, he kisses his hands. He says, please enter into my house. He brings him into the home. He puts him at the head of the household, at the head of the home where they were having the lessons. He introduces him. He sits humbly before Mullah Mahdi Naraghi and he says the following. He says, truly you are our master. Then he says, Mullah Mahdi, do you know why I behaved in the way that I behaved? Mullah Mahdi, he says, no. Sayyid Bahrul Ulum, he says that you had written in your book that a mu'min, a believer, has forgiveness towards his Muslim brother. I wanted to see if you had forgiveness towards your Muslim brother. He says that in your book you had written that a believer does not have su'ud towards his brother. He doesn't assume the worst about his brother. I wanted to see if you had developed this characteristic within yourself. He says that now I see that truly you are our master, you are our teacher. And this whole time, Sayyid Bahrul Ulum, he is sitting in front of Mullah Mahdi Naraghi in a very deep state of humility. He's sitting on his knees, almost like a child would sit in front of his parents. And he says, Ya Mullah Mahdi, please teach us, illuminate our hearts. And Mullah Mahdi, he begins to mention a few points. And eventually the time comes when he has to get up, he has to leave. Again, Sayyid Bahrul Ulum, he goes with him barefoot, bareheaded, to the edge of the kucha, the edge of the street. And he pays his respect, and Mullah Mahdi Naraghi, he ends up going back to Iran. My brothers and sisters, this issue of humility that we hear so much about in the Quran, it is something which is one of the most important of characteristics. We don't realize it many times, just how important it is. But when we turn our hearts to Karbala, one of the things that we see is that humility was a characteristic that actually saved one of the individuals in the army of Yazid. Many of you know this story. It is the story of a man by the name of Hur, that when he stops the army of Imam Hussein. And he was the individual that was the first commander to block the path of Imam Hussein. He says to the Imam that I am not allowed to let you move from here. The Imam says that you have to let me go. He says that I am not allowed. I have my orders. The Imam, he turns towards him and he says, woe upon you, Ya Hur. May your mother grieve over you. May your mother grieve over you. This was one of the sayings of the Arabs, that you are doing something extremely wrong. Do you know what Hur says? Hur, he turns towards the Imam. He says that if anyone else had said this to me, I would have replied with the same response. He says, but I know that your mother is none other than Fatima Zahra alayha salam. He says, how can I say this to you? He doesn't say a word. He shows that level of humility towards the Imam. Several days pass. As the days pass and the day of Ashura arrives, Hur, he realizes that this army is actually going to attack the Imam. Hur, he hadn't realized that it was going to reach this point. He thought that a compromise would be made. How could anyone be willing to kill Imam Hussein, the grandson of Rasulullah? He begins to see, no, Umar ibn Sa'ad, this army, it's serious. They're going to kill. They're going to fight. Heads are going to be rolling. He doesn't know what to do, because on one hand, he knows death awaits. And it isn't just death, it is the loss of all of his possessions. It is his children becoming orphans, his wife becoming a widow, not having any property because the government would take everything from you. After a lifetime of service, he doesn't know what to do. One of the individuals by the name of Muhajir, he says, I saw Hur. He begins to gradually go away from the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad. He is going, his horse is moving slowly towards the camp of Hussein. He says, I went towards him. I asked him that, Ya Hur, if anyone had asked me who is from the bravest men of Kufa, I would have mentioned your name. But I'm looking at you. Why is it that I see that your body is shaking, your body is shivering? Hur, he turns towards him. He says that truly I see myself in between paradise and hell. And he says, even if my body is cut into pieces, even if my body is burnt, I cannot choose anything but paradise. Saying this, Hur, he begins to go towards the camp of Imam Hussein. But how does he approach the camp of Imam Hussein? Some narrations, they say that he is approaching the camp of Imam Hussein, but he has taken off his shoes. He has taken the shoes and he has tied the shoelaces, and he has hung the shoelaces and the shoes around his neck as a sign of humility. When he is approaching the Imam, he wants to approach the Imam with the utmost level of humility. He approaches the Imam, he gets close to the Imam, and he says to him with a broken heart, he says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. The Imam, he responds, he says to the Imam, Ya Imam, I have come to you as a great sinner. I have come to you as one whose heart is completely black. He says that I am ashamed because I am that same individual that blocked your path. I didn't allow you to go on the way that you were going. I put fear into the heart of your children. He says, Ya Aba Abdullah, is there any way that I can be forgiven? Hal tara li min tawbah? Ibn Rasulullah, is there anything that I can do that this sin can be wiped away? This shame can be wiped away? Look at the humility of this man. Imam Hussein, he looks at him and he says one line. He says, Ya Hur, you have already been forgiven. He doesn't look at Hur and say, Ya Hur, you did this to us. You began this chain of events. You scared the little children in my camp. He doesn't say a word. The Imam, he says, Ya Hur, you have already been forgiven. Come and join us. Hur, he is embarrassed to join the camp of Imam Hussein. One of the scholars say that As Hur was walking around, he was embarrassed to join the Imam. One of the things that he keeps repeating to himself is Allahumma inni ar'abtu quluba awliyaik. He is repeating to himself that, Ya Allah, I am that same individual who frightened the hearts of your awliya. On the day of Ashura, Hur is the first individual. He says, Ya Imam, as I was the first individual to put this fear into the heart of your children, allow me to be the first to go and to meet these individuals in battle. Hur goes, he fights bravely. He is cut down. When he is cut down, one of the final things that he calls out is that he says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifanaik. عليكم مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. يا حسين صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
صلى على محمد وآل محمد. ثانية على حب الزهراء صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. ثالثة لتعجيل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Inshallah, just a reminder before we enter into the majalis every single night, that when we shed tears for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, we hope that these tears can be translated into action in our daily lives to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to pay closer attention to the wajib and haram, and to become better individuals overall. Shedding tears is something amazing, and this is an opportunity, but we want to turn this opportunity into action to change our whole beings, inshallah, and change our lives. They say that you can't shed tears simply putting your head down in grief, even fake crying. Inshallah, you'll still get the same reward as if you were somebody who's crying for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. And if you feel that tears are hard to shed in these nights, they say to do istighfar if you can, before the majalis start, to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask for forgiveness for a few seconds, and this may soften the heart to shed more tears. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله. صلى الله عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة وموضع الرسالة ومختلف الملائكة. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon you, our beloved holy Prophet, and the Ahl al-Bayt. It was in your homes that Allah blessed us with guidance and revelation. And upon you descend the angels day in and day out. Everybody together. Ya Habibi, Ya Hussein, Nur Aini, Ya Hussein, Ya Habibi, Ya Hussein, Nur Aini, Ya Hussein. Our beloved
beloved Hussein, light of our eyes Hussein, Ya Rahmatullah al-Wasi'ah Hussein. O vast mercy of Allah, Hussein. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Sallallahu alayka ya Madlum. Sallallahu alayka ya ayyuha ash-shaheed fi Karbala. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon you, our beloved Imam al-Hussein, our beloved oppressed Imam, the Imam who was slaughtered by the shores of the Euphrates, while his mouth was dry of thirst. Brothers and sisters, we will dedicate this night to the companions of Aba Abdullah, the companions who the Imam addresses on the night prior to Karbala massacre, saying, I don't know of companions better or more loyal than mine, nor relatives as righteous in keeping of kinship than mine. May Allah reward you on behalf of me all good. Imagine these companions hearing these words, knowing that the coming day would be their last. Imam al-Hussein went on to say, and I believe this is our last day. Alas, I grant you permission to leave, and I will not hold anything against you. The night is set upon you. You may take your camels and leave. It is said that one of the companions, as a response to Aba Abdullah, showing his love and showing that he'll be with them until the very end, for all of eternity, says, Wallah, law alimtu inni uqtal, thumma ahya, thumma ahraq, thumma udarra, yaf'alu bi dhalika 70 marra, ma taraktuka, fakayfa wa innama hiya qatla wahida, thumma al-karamata ila al-abad. This companion says, by Allah, were I to know that I would be killed, then brought back to life, then burned, then left to rest, then be killed again, and brought back to life, and burnt 70 more times, I would never leave you, for it is a one-time death, and we attain honor for all eternity. A blessed poet helps us visualize the words of these companions. We stand here before you, our numbers may be few, but here we are, the best companions. From where are our lessons? Maytham at-Tamma. Maytham gave everything, a moon that was circling your father's star. For Ali crucified, we've come with the same pride, from near and from far. Our faith will not shatter like Malik al-Ashtar. We're a mountain, a scar upon his eyes, so may our bodies lie here in ruin. Thirsty will drink the sword, will be quenched by our Lord at the fountain that sits inside heaven. We'll wait there with Hassan for you, Ya Hussein. This is how the companions of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein were, brothers and sisters. This is how the companions of Imam al-Mahdi should be. These companions were elite followers, masters of all of the Muslims. Some of them had lived amongst the Prophet ﷺ, and others were just committed followers. Many of them had witnessed the battles and events of the commander of the believers, Imam Ali alayhi salam. The companions of Aba Abdullah were the noblest warriors amongst the Muslims, and yet they're most intelligent and learned amongst everyone. Their commitment to martyrdom with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is unprecedented in the history of the Muslim armies. And make no mistake, there was no coincidence in this. These people had firm ideologies and true following, in every sense of the word, to their Imam, to the Imam of their time. They stood firm upon faith and in their jihad and struggle until this day, in which their stances are venerated and admired for the noble of us to emulate and follow them. They represented the standard by which we measure loyalty, sacrifice, and giving. Among these noble companions was John, Mawla Abidar al-Ghaffari, Habib ibn Mudahir, Muslim ibn Awsajan, Hurr al-Riyahi, and many others. Hurr al-Riyahi, brothers and sisters, was a captain in Yazid's army. He was the captain who stopped Abu Abdullah from going to Kufa. He, with his 1,000 men, forced Hussein to come to Karbala and stay there. The name Hurr means to be free. Hurr lived up to his name. He freed himself from the fire of hell before it was too late. We should think of Hurr all the time during our lives. Hurr had a choice between heaven and hell. He had a choice between glory in this world and happiness in the hereafter. It is never too late to ask for forgiveness. Hurr chose heaven and he chose happiness in the hereafter. In our lives there are many times when we have to make a choice between good and bad, between right and wrong, between halal and haram, between heaven and hell. Look at the disrespect shown to the grandson of the Holy Prophet. It is said that the enemy said, there is water near, the dogs and pigs drink from it, even wolves take from it, but you cannot have a drop from this water. Hurr was very restless on the day of Ashura, and he's for sure thinking what a grave mistake he made by stopping Abu Abdullah in Karbala, as if his heart is screaming, what have I done? Why did I put the son of Fatima in this position? Will Hussein forgive me? Will Allah forgive me? When the 10th of Muharram came, it was very early in the morning. The horses in Yazid's camp were hot and uncomfortable. They were jumping up and down. They could not keep their hoofs on the ground because it was so hot. It has been said that Yazid's soldiers poured buckets of water on the horses' hoofs to cool them down and calm them down. Hurr watched as the gallons of water were poured on the horses. He couldn't take it anymore. Maybe he's thinking so much water for the animals, while the children of Fatima are crying for a few drops of water. There is so much water for the animals, but none for the grandson of the Holy Prophet. Hurr was intensely thinking, going back and forth. A soldier saw him and then said, Hurr, if anyone was to ask me who's the bravest warrior in Kufa, if anyone was to ask me who's the bravest warrior in Kufa, I would say that it was you. What is making you tremble like this, Hurr? Hurr then replied, Wallah, anni khayru nafsi bayna al-jannati wal-nar. I swear by Allah that I am deciding between heaven and hell, and I will prefer nothing over paradise, even if I will be cut off, even if I will be burned. Hurr mounted the horse and headed towards Abu Abdullah's camp with all humility in his face. Hussein's camp readied their arms to attack him, but they see that Hurr is not coming for combat. His arms are above his head and he goes to Hussein and says, Yabna Rasulillah, I'm the one who caused fear to enter the hearts of your women and children. Is there any way that I could be forgiven? Abu Abdullah says without any hesitation, he says, yes, Allah has already forgiven you, Hurr. Allah is Arhamur Rahimeen. He is the most merciful and always waiting for us to turn back to him. Hurr is now forgiven, but he doesn't stop there. He wants to take permission from Abu Abdullah to go to the battlefield. He insisted on being one of the first to go to battle the enemies. Umar ibn Sa'd prepared his army to fight against Imam al-Hussein and called out, lift the flag. This enemy soldier raised the flag, stood under it, snatched a bow and shot it towards the Imam. Umar continued saying, bear witness before the prince that I am the first to fire an arrow. The rest of Umar ibn Sa'd's army followed him with arrows. The rest of Umar ibn Sa'd's army started shooting arrows at the Imam and his companions. Abu Abdullah says, Qumu rahimakumullah. Rise, may Allah have mercy upon you. Prepare yourselves, O noble ones. Prepare yourselves for the inevitable death. The companions gathered themselves all at once. Aba Abdullah gives Hur permission to go fight on the battlefield. Aba Abdullah mounts Hur onto his horse and he went to the battlefield. He was a strong and brave warrior. He fought many on the battlefield bravely and set many of Yazid's men to death. Eventually, Hur came off his horse, severely wounded, calling for Aba Abdullah, sending his last salams to Aba Abdullah, saying, Mawlai, alayka minni salam. Let me see you for the last time. Hur was taking his final breath and Aba Abdullah comes near Hur and it said that he puts his head in his lap. Fi amanillah Hur, my grandfather is waiting for you. My mother and father are waiting for you. We will be joining you soon. Fi amanillah ya Hur, ajarakumullah, brothers and sisters. The holy soul of Hur departs on the lands of Karbala. Aba Abdullah in this moment with tears in his eyes prayed for Hur at the time of his death. Ya Allah, please forgive Hur and grant him a place in paradise. Another one of the companions that was fighting, his name was Muslim ibn Awsaja. Imam al-Hussein and Habib ibn Mubahir went to Muslim. Imam Hussein stood above his head and recited a verse from the Quran. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rijalun la tulhihim tijaratun wa la bay'un an dhikrillah wa iqamis salati wa ita'iz zakat yakhafuna yawman tataqallabu fihi al-qulub wal-absar. Men whom neither traffic nor merchandise can divert them from the remembrance of Allah, nor from the prayer, nor from the practice of charity. Their only fear is the day when the hearts and eyes will be transformed on the day of judgment. It is said that Muslim still had not passed away yet. Habib was talking to Muslim. Look at the brotherhood between the companions of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Habib says to Muslim, Ya Muslim, it pains me to see you in your tragedy, Ya Muslim. Bear tidings of heaven, O Muslim. Muslim replied, May Allah give you goodness, my brother. Habib then said to him, Had I not known I'm in the same position as you, I would have wished that you ask of me what you wish. Muslim opened his eyes and pointed to Abu Abdullah and said, Ya Habib, usika bihada. Ya Habib, I entrust you to this person to do all good to him. Fight on his behalf and don't fail in aiding him. He's pointing to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. This Habib, brothers and sisters, fought with Hussein until glory. How can we forget about these companions? Muslim ibn Awsaja's blessed body departs on the lands of Karbala. A time comes when Habib goes to the battlefield. It is said that Habib was around 90 years old, and amongst those who'd witnessed Rasulullah, he stood before Abu Abdullah and began to cry on the day of Ashura. Abu Abdullah said to him, Ya Habib, have you remembered your family? Have you remembered your homelands? You are free to leave if you wish, Ya Habib. Habib responded saying, No, Mawla, I have replaced my family with a new family, and my home with a new home. Abu Abdullah then asked him, Then why do you cry, Ya Habib? Habib pointed towards Lady Zainab. She was standing at the door of the tent. He said, I cry for this woman, and what will happen to her after you, Ya Abu Abdullah? Hussein looked behind him and saw his sister Zainab. The calamities of Zainab were always on his mind. Habib said, Ya Zainab, the day is coming that you'll be upon a camel, and this head of mine will be hanging, and the head of your brother upon the head of a spear, along with the heads of the companions. He hurried to the battlefield and fought like the bravest of warriors. Soon after battling, his voice was heard after taking so much damage. Ya Aba Abdullah, adrikni Master, come aid me. Abu Abdullah goes to Habib and puts his head in his lap and said, may Allah have mercy upon your soul, Ya Habib. Send my salutations to Rasulullah. The blessed soul of Habib departs on the lands of Karbala. All the other companions go one by one. We have those of the likes of Abbas going to the battlefield. Enemies would run away from Abbas. They could not handle Abbas. It is said that Abbas would take off his armor and he would throw his sword and his shield to the ground. He would start fighting the enemies with his bare hands. The companions would look at him. The enemies would look at Abbas. They would ask him, oh Abbas, have you gone insane? And then Abbas says, Ay wallah, hubb al-Husayn jannani. Abbas says, yes, the love of Hussein has driven me insane. Until Abbas attained Shahada on the lands of Karbala. All the companions one by one are losing their lives on the day of Ashura. Until there was none left on the battlefield. Abu Abdullah began to look from the left and from the right. No Habib, no Muslim, no Ali al-Akbar, no Abbas, no Qasim. The Imam stood before the bodies of the martyrs and began to call out, Ya Habib ibn Mudahir, Ya Zuhair, wa ya Hilal ibn Nafi, wa ya Muslim ibn Awsaja, Ya Hurr al-Riyahi, Ya Fulan wa ya Fulan, Ya Fursan al-Wagha, wal Youth al-Hijab, Mali unadikum fala tasma'un, وأدعوكم فلا تجيبون أنتم نيام أرجوكم تنتبهون أم حالت نومتكم بينكم وبين إمامكم فقوموا من نومتكم أيها الكرام وادفعوا عن حرم رسول الله هؤلاء الطغاة اللئام. Abu Abdullah starts calling them out one by one, saying, rise, O generous ones, O warriors of the battlefield. Why is it that I call upon you and you don't respond to me? Are you unconscious, or is it that your sleep has separated you from your Imam? Rise from your sleep, my dears, and fight off these evil tyrants and defend the women of Rasulullah. في أمان الله يا شهيد الله، في أمان الله يا حبيب الله، في أمان الله يا شهيد الله، في أمان الله يا حبيب الله. Everybody together. وحسينا يا وحسينا وشهيدا وغريبا ومظلوما وحسينا. Everybody to let us send our salams to Abu Abdullah, as we do every single night from our hearts towards Abu Abdullah. يا حسينا سلام من قلوب أنت فيها، يا حسينا يا حسينا سلام من قلوب أنت فيها، يا حسينا لك الأرواح طرا نفتديها يا حسينا. Peace be upon you from all the hearts you are in. Ya Husayna, peace be upon you from all the hearts you are in. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل بيت محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. To Allah we belong, and to Him is our return, and soon the aggressors will know what change their affairs will take, and the end times will be for the righteous. Ya Allah, in the name of Hussein, by the thirst of Hussein, by the right of Hussein, we ask you to forgive our sins. We ask you to allow us to shed tears and make a change through these majalis. We ask you to give us a good end on the path of truth. We ask you to fill our hearts with the love of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. We ask you to cure our sick ones and forgive our deceased, Ya Allah. We ask you to bring victory and relief to the oppressed all around the world, specifically those in Palestine, Ya Allah. We ask you to hasten the return of our Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, and to make us amongst his loyal supporters, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين.
Inshallah, we'll finish off with Ziyarat Warith. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Inshallah, after Ziyarat Warith, Latmiya is going to be held in the other hall. Inshallah, we'll combine all the brothers together. If you can give me another salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتود. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلت، ولعن الله أمة ظلمت، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الردي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله
أني بكم مؤمن وبإيابكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم، بأبي أنت وأمي يا ابن رسول الله، بأبي أنت وأمي يا أبا عبد الله. لقد عظمت الرزية وجلت المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل السماوات والأرض، فلعن الله أمة أسرجت وألجمت وتهيأت لقتالك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله. قد صدت حرمك وأتيت إلى مشهدك، أسأل الله بالشأن الذي لك عنده وبالمحل الذي لك لديه أن يصلي على محمد وآل محمد، وأن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة. Everybody together. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى أبي الفضل العباس وعلى الحوراء زينب ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين.
عظم الله أجركم إن شاء الله. Please join us tomorrow night in remembrance of the tragedy of Abu Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, and keep us in your du'as. And there's left me across in the other hall. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi Muhammad. Hassan, why are you not in the other hall?
I found in the moon for 30 minutes. I mean, for a minute and a half, like 30 minutes there. So I said, let's do it together. I said, okay.
Tell him to come in here.
And then I told him to come in here, that, oh, it's more Rouhani and
Hassan,
yeah, but we're not on. It's fine. I'll take it.
why are they turning on the lights and attitude like that?
He's like, I want to see what people are doing in the back.
Who said that?
Hilal.
Huh? No, he said Habib, I'm sorry, my hands are outside.
It's okay.
Habib, nice to see you. Habib. What did he, Habib, what did he say? He's the one that turned the lights on during it? No, I'm gonna tell him right now. Can't do nothing.